The story begins at the airport, where all the students gather for the excursion. However, their flight malfunctions, and they land on a strange, ropey island. When Matsumi wakes up from the crash, she panics when she realizes she's in an unfamiliar place. After calming down, she looks for her bag and is relieved to find it. Suddenly, he noticed the hand of a dead man nearby, which frightened him. He ran into the nearby woods and called out to his close friend Cheetos in alarm. Instead of Cheetos, he meets Matsuoka, one of his classmates, which brings him relief. Matsumi asks Matsuoka about the other survivors and explains that he was the first person he encountered. Matsuoka informs Matsumi that the island seems to have some inhabitants, as she found household utensils earlier. With no phone reception, they decide to search for other survivors and potential inhabitants. Meanwhile, other students also survive the crash. Gino, a popular girl from their class, demands the boys find her food, offering to show them something intriguing in return. However, they rudely decline, prompting Gino to use her influence as a popular classmate and flash her weapon at them. The boys retreat, and another classmate intervenes, advising against fighting. And instead, they should focus on finding food first so they could survive on that island. One of their classmates named Kai asks if anyone has a working phone in order to search for the location of the place they are in. Shidais tells them that her phone is working, but it has no reception. They were all demotivated upon hearing this, but upon seeing the vending machine, they all thought that maybe there are people living in that place, so they all decide to search for them. One of their classmates tells them that she needs to go for a nature's call. As she was relieving herself, she saw two giant butterflies coming towards her. She screams loudly, shouting for help, and everyone rushes towards her. Matsumi and Matsuoka also hear her scream and rush towards her as well. The butterfly kills the girl by sucking her dry, and the two boys were also sucked dry as they were trying to save her from the butterflies. Matsumi and Matsuoka make it to the scene and see the horrible sight. Chidais was about to be killed by those giant butterflies. In order to help her, Matsuoka uses a knife she found earlier and attacks the butterfly, but it was of no use because their skin was very tough. Matsumi, using her knowledge about insects, manages to save everyone by killing one of those butterflies using a gas spray with a lighter that Matsuoka had found earlier. Everyone was overjoyed, but Matsumi was sad because she loved insects. They meet the remaining survivors from their class, who were all panicking and complaining, wondering what is going on because they were all terrified on seeing those giant butterflies that killed 3 of their classmates. Kai puts up a question. Is it normal for a butterfly to be that big on a tropical island? Matsumi explains that it is impossible because insects in the modern era could only survive if they are small. Otherwise, they will be extinct. Knowing that Matsumi knows a lot of information about insects, Chidos asks her for advice on what to do next. She tells them that they need to hide and survive for 3 days until the self-defense force comes to rescue them, because the self-defense force is bound to come since there might be people living there. As they all discussed what to do next, they would report on the butterflies. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a helicopter and run towards it, thinking that help has arrived. However, it turns out to be a giant bee. Seeing this, Chidais immediately sacrifices herself to save Matsumi and is taken away by a bee. Matsumi is devastated, but Matsuoka tells her not to give up. They decide to go and save Chidos instead, but unfortunately most of their classmates disagree and tell him that Chidos is dead and that they should put their own safety first. One of their classmates, Atsushi, comes and starts telling them that they need to find a leader to handle situations like these, trying to recommend himself. Matsumi explains to everyone that Chidos is not dead, as the wasp that carried her was a mud wasp, which usually uses a paralyzing agent and carries its prey back to their nest. She tells them that she knows where it went. Most of her classmates disagree, insisting they should wait for the rescue team to come in 3 days. Matsumi immediately replies, telling them that they should hurry in saving her, as otherwise, the egg of the wasp will hatch, and they will start eating Chidos from the inside. They are all terrified upon hearing this. Matsuoka tells Matsumi that they should leave the rest of their heartless classmates and go save her together. Atsushi stops them and self-proclaims himself as a leader, saying he won't let them go because it might reduce their chance of survival. Matsumi tells him that Chidos has a working phone, which is waterproof, and they could call for help to rescue them from the island. However, Atsushi immediately tells her they cannot make calls because there is no service on that island. In order to convince him, Matsumi explains they can use the GPS on her phone to know their exact location and altitudes, and with this knowledge, she can predict what kind of insects live on the island, thus increasing their chance of survival. Eventually, they all agree to save Chidos. As they proceed on their way, one of their classmates, Kai, asks if it's really safe to approach a wasp nest. Matsumi tells them they are safer in the nest than outside because a mud wasp never returns to its nest once it lays its eggs there. After a while, they reach a place that looks like a village, but it is abandoned. And they saw a house where the wasps had turned it into their nest. They were all afraid to go inside, but they had to make a choice. When they opened a room in that house, they saw a horrible sight. Most of their classmates were there, being eaten alive by the larvae of the wasps. They thought of helping them, but they knew it was too late, so they all fled from that room. Matsumi suggested they continue checking the other houses to find Chidais, but then Kai told her they didn't need to anymore since he had already found a working smartphone in that room earlier. As they were arguing, another wasp came and was carrying one of Atsushi's close friend, Akira. Seeing this, Atsushi immediately went after it to help his friend, but the wasp attacked him. He was saved by Matsumi, but even after that, he went after the wasp again, and Matsumi decided to go after him. Inside the nest, they immediately saw a wasp attacking Atsushi, but both of them managed to escape and found both of their friends. Matsumi tried to carry Chidos outside, who was unconscious from the wasp's venom, but she was too heavy, so she asked Atsushi for help. However, he ran away instead while carrying his unconscious friend, Akira. Suddenly, a huge number of wasps came into the nest, and as the wasp tried to attack Matsumi, she was really worried. But then, Matsuoka came to save her, and they managed to run away from the nest and regroup. Matsumi ignored what Atsushi did and told them they needed saline water or a sports drink to remove the poison from their unconscious friend and revive them. Kai recommended they go to a place he saw on the direction board as it might have the necessary items. As they were walking, Jino asked Matsumi why all the wasps came to the nest even though she said they wouldn't. And why did the wasps attack each other in that nest? Watsumi explains to them that it was her plan to call them, and she used hairspray to attract them. The reason they fought each other is because she put the hairspray on one of the wasps, stimulating all the others to attack it. This strategy allowed them to survive and save Chidos. She also warns everyone not to use cosmetics on the island because it will attract insects, potentially putting them at risk. Hearing all this, Matsuoka becomes curious and asks Watsumi how she knew all this. Watsumi explains that in the past, a teacher piqued her interest in insects and taught her about their wonders, which is why she knows so much about them. As they proceed to their destination, Watsumi notices they are surrounded by giant hard ticks in their nest. Using her knowledge, she guides everyone on how to survive by conserving heat, walking slowly to produce less carbon dioxide, and making as little sound as possible to avoid detection by the ticks. As they try to escape, they encounter their teacher, who is infected with ticks and is on the verge of death. Mom gets angry and runs away and manages them to identify the ticks. In a selfless act, Watsumi sacrifices his teacher to save everyone, allowing them to escape the hive. They are then submerged in the nearby ocean to remove ticks attached to their bodies. Mami expresses gratitude towards Matsuoka for saving her earlier, leading to a moment of intimacy. Meanwhile, Gina manipulates Atsushi, the group leader, for her benefit by shaking the ground with him. Eventually, they reach their destination, a huge abandoned hospital. Matsumi instructs Atsushi to gather supplies from the medicine room so she can treat Akira. After a while, Chidos arrived at EDSA with supplies. Matsumi began treating Chidos and Akira to save their lives. Kai found the power control room and turned on all the lights in the hospital. He also discovered food, which he brought for everyone. While eating their food, Matsumi had an uneasy feeling and wondered why. Despite the place being safe and having food, they couldn't see anyone else in the hospital. After eating, Kai went to search for a shower room, but instead, he encountered a horrifying sight when he opened a room, causing him to scream loudly. Everyone heard his scream, and immediately the hospital started shaking due to the flapping of wings of a large insect. Akira immediately regained consciousness and started moving erratically, his eyes protruding outward, indicating he was infected by a parasite earlier that had taken over his body. He ran outside, climbed a tower, and began calling for a predator insect. Patsushi attempted to save Akira, but Matsumi stopped him, insisting they should go inside the hospital to avoid attracting the predator. Patsushi ignored her and went to save Akira, but the giant insect arrived and immediately killed Akira. Gino pulled Matsumi away, urging her to run inside the hospital. They left the others behind, locked the door, and Gino warned that they might be infected too, explaining her reason for locking the door. Chidos regained consciousness upon hearing Matsumi's loud shouts, prompting her to urge Gino to help. Annoyed, Gino attempted to silence her, but before she could, Kai intervened, knocking both Gino and Patsushi unconscious. He then went to save Matsumi and the others who were outside as well. After that, he tied up both Patsushi and Gino. Matsumi was very happy to see Chidos finally regaining consciousness. They all decided to discuss a plan to get rid of the giant insect to survive. The plan involved using a huge light in the tower to attract the insect, and then killing it with high-voltage electricity. As per the plan, Matsumi went outside and slowly walked towards the tower. After climbing to the top, she covered the light with a cloth and wrapped it with a rope. She signaled to turn on the light, then slid down the tower and ran towards the insect, using a mini siren to produce a loud sound to attract it. The insect immediately chased after him, and he guided it towards the tower with the lights on. When he got there, he tried to pull the rope of the lights, but it got stuck, so he had no choice but to climb up and somehow managed to open the cloth to let the light shine. The insect followed the light, and using high-voltage electricity, thanks to Matsumi's knowledge, they were able to survive the night and kill it. However, Matsumi is deeply saddened and tells Hidaz that she is not trained to kill insects, and she begins to cry. Afterwards, they held a meeting and unanimously agreed to choose Chidos as the new leader. They decide to leave the hospital and move to the next place to survive. Itsashi and Gino chose to leave them at the hospital for causing them so much trouble.